be smoldering without them. They break down stigmas, build up equity, and just say yes. Yes to good troublemaking. Yes to being empowered. Yes to fair access. Now more than ever, Weedmap says yes and stands with the fighters for change.
Welcome to this conversation on Green Enterprise, a partnership between my company, Digital Venture Partners, and Black Enterprise, where this week we're having a series of conversations with prominent Black cannabis entrepreneurs and executives that I feel like are having great success in creating inroads for more of us to come into the space and succeed. In this particular conversation, I have an NBA legend and his business partner / son talking about the advances that they're making with their company, Isaiah International. So I'm super excited about this conversation. How you guys doing today?
Doing well. We're a bit snowed in, but that's all right.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. Everybody's dealing with some type of weather crisis right now. Crazy thing, Isaiah, before we even had this this scheduled, I've been watching a bunch of content about you the last couple of weeks, man, because you know how YouTube is in your head. And I love the show that you used to be on, Open Court. So for like the past 3 weeks, I've been watching like all the old Open Court episodes, and they're like, "Oh, you guys want to talk to Isaiah and Zeke Thomas?" I'm like, "Yes." So it's a real honor to have a conversation with you today.
Oh, thank you. And those were fun, and we always had a lot of fun doing them, as you can see.
Right, of course, and not to get too far off on a tangent, but I know, like, I feel like you guys, that show was the blueprint for like a lot of these artists. I mean, athlete to athlete based like platforms and shows and podcasts. So I don't think people give y'all flowers for showing that, you know, ex-athletes can carry content themselves.
Players only, baby.
Right. So jumping in, I was doing some research about Isaiah International. And you guys have been in business and been successful in various industries and segments for years. I would love for you guys to give us kind of a backstory on how the company came together and why recently you identified cannabis as a great a great industry to go into.
Well, we started, Isaiah International, the firm. I started it actually in '84. And Magic and I he started Magic Enterprises. I started Isaiah International. Our first acquisition was actually a radio station in Denver. We bought a radio station, then we invested in some real estate property together. And as the firm kept growing, I kept investing, kept moving into different spaces. And then I started becoming operational within the state of Michigan. And in the state of Michigan, started in candy bars and ice cream. And my econ teacher always told me to invest in things that you like, things that you're passionate about. Candy and ice cream at that time. And then it moved into 1992. We purchased American Speedy Printing. I had over 700 print quick chains across the United States. Was on the cover of Forbes magazine in 1992. Was the first NBA player to be on the cover of Forbes magazine in Sports Illustrated. 94 retired. Was co-founder of the Toronto Raptors, and then after that, entered into the popcorn space. Again, things that I like. So when you go into the store, you see that red bag of kettle corn, and it says Indiana Popcorn. That was a company that I co-founded. So that then went into the champagne space. And Joshua actually made the first trip over to France, over to Champagne to meet the family, helped negotiate the deal, put it together, entered into the champagne space. But, the whole focus of Isaiah International is to uplift my family out of poverty. I was the first person of generational wealth. First person of wealth in my family. The goal is to leave generational wealth for, my wife, nieces, nephews, kids, and everybody else. And so you'll see when you look on our website, you'll see a lot of my nieces and nephews, kids working in the business, and that's part of their way of paying back their student loans. They come into the business, they have to work, and that's how I got into the space. But Joshua can speak more about the cannabis space and he found it so interesting, and why he introduced me to it in a lot of ways.
Okay, and sorry, before you go into that, you go by Zeke also, right?
Yes.
Cool, because okay, Camille he introduced us, and I was like, Joshua, he been calling you Zeke this whole time. I'm like, okay, but yeah, go ahead, bro. I would love to hear about just you identifying this new emerging space where honestly it's not enough of us in, and kind of what was the catalyst for you to say, okay, this is something worthwhile for us to put our resources in.
Definitely. The first foray of me working with my father in a heavy business capacity was, yes, as he said, Sharon Champagne. And that was an exciting experience, not only because it was champagne and branding and marketing, but also importing and exporting, being an importer, learning how to bring a product from overseas into the United States, and the struggles that come with that. That's what I have applied to my cannabis space. Cannabis to me was definitely a creative space for me, in terms of my usage, being a DJ, music producer, constantly in recording studios where THC consumption was going on. My sister, she suffers from chronic pain, and she actually introduced me very first to CBD, the other strains. And I got very interested, just very interested in how our people were separated from the plant, in terms of prohibition, in terms of cotton, because as many know, the Civil War uniforms were made from hemp, not cotton or any other textile. So knowing the history of the plant, as it grows, in the Americas and Africa and around the world, and how it can have such a great impact on carbon and climate change, it really piques my interest, because I see in the cannabis industry kind of a microcosm of society, unlike sports and entertainment, which we also specialize in. I see, big corporations getting into the space, and the farmers kind of getting pushed out, much unlike the champagne space, which we got into and have been successful in now for 4 years, and definitely have some big announcements coming up. And learning from this man in business has been a pleasure, and one that I took for granted, definitely. When I think of my dad, he's my dad. It's just dad. He likes Ritz crackers and soup. But also, thinking about his background in business, the way that, when everybody thinks about, him being president of a team, that's running an entire organization. It's not just, trade here and this there. There's a lot that goes into that, and the respect factor of him founding a team overseas, or not overseas, in another country, and then having the foresight to go into the champagne space. And then, yes, I might have convinced him to explore the cannabis space, but I also was interested in another business that we exited out of. And he had the forthright to see, hey, this space is more than CBD. It's more than THC, CBG, and the other cannabinoids. What this really is about is the entire hemp plant returning and being able to not only, help your mental health, but also, really save CO2, save the climate, and also, hopefully give us some new threads to wear.
Right. I agree 100%. People don't understand how vast and how much depth it is to the cannabis industry. I would love because you spoke on it a little bit. I actually came from a music background myself also. Like, what were some of the similarities you see from like music and entertainment and cannabis? Because people don't realize that. I always say the same person who was spending $20 or $30 at the CD store, now they just have a app on their phone, but they still spend that money in cannabis at a dispensary or on CBD. So you're kind of marketing to the same person in a lot of instances. Like, what if anything did you learn from music that you've applied to cannabis?
I've learned two things from music that I've applied to cannabis. The first thing being bias. I found that a lot of people in the industry and a lot of people of color don't trust the other cannabinoids, CBD or CBG. Nah, I'm good. I'm happy about this THC. Nah, I don't need that cream. Nah, I'm good. So I found a lot of bias in terms of people trying other things. You know, being in the studio, you get so used to your pattern, your creative pattern, and if you're really disciplined at it, you get great results. Eminem is one of the people who is known for how diligent he is in his music, the way he comes in at 9 and leaves at 5. There are stories of, artists showing up late and Eminem's leaving, and he's like, "Well, you were late. I'll see you tomorrow. I work 9 to 5." So the discipline factor, when cannabis, can help you be creative, transfer you into the multiverse and stuff like that. But also, cannabis can be a distraction. I know many artists who just kind of sit in the studio and just rack up that bill. So any artist watching this, I encourage you, take the time to be creative, but also take the time to be disciplined. The second thing that I learned from being in the music industry and applying it to cannabis is joy. The joy that can come from discovering something that makes you feel better. There are multiple strains, multiple types of ways that you can use it, apply it, whatever, and everybody has a different way that works for them. If this strain doesn't work for you, you might be able to try this one and go, so forth and so on. I really think that the greatest thing is like when you hear that song and you got that hook right and you got that verse right. When I see somebody who looks at me and says, "Wow, Josh," or Zeke, as everybody calls me, but Josh as my dad calls me, and my mom will never call me Zeke. It's that joy that really comes over your face when you know that you helped somebody, that you genuinely helped somebody feel better, just plain and simple. Do you feel better?
Right, that's amazing. And going back over to you, Isaiah, you were obviously one of the greatest basketball players in American history. And I always say that you would be even better today than you were in the 80s, because I think you're more of the prototypical guard that we see today. But coming from in the 80s, you saw kind of the relationship between professional sports and cannabis evolve, right? And to where now, as you know, the NBA and NFL have really relaxed their views on the plant. How do you feel like that has an effect on maybe athletes moving forward to maybe really be able to treat or heal themselves through cannabis or CBD as opposed to maybe some type of opioid or other alternative?
The plant, the healing factors, and the information and education around the plant will be life changing. And the discovery of the endocannabinoid system that we all have. None of us knew that we had that inside our body, and the way opioids were basically being used to treat the things that the plant actually works for within your body. So your CB1 and your CB2 receptors that works directly with the hemp plant, that works directly with the cannabis plant. It's almost as if this plant was created for your body. And what we're finding in sport, and I think what the medical industry is finding also, is that the more you use this plant, the more you discover about it, the more we learn about our endocannabinoid systems and our CB1, CB2 receptors, how they respond to the plant. The more education we get, the more information we get, the better we'll be at self-healing, the better we'll be at knowledge. The plant, in terms of its the way it was, I guess, banned from the American use, and in the way the pharmaceutical industries and other industry more or less regulated against the plant. We see other industries popped up and became, big money makers around the pseudo use of this plant. However, now that the plant is really coming back and people are finding out all the real benefits of it, its impact in terms of what it's going to do in sport, what it's already done to the medical field, what it's continuing to do to the medical field. And as they say, knowledge is power. And the more knowledge the athlete gets about his body, and the more he understands and she understands how it reacts with the plant, I think the more use it will have.
Exactly. I think every athlete wants an edge, and a legal edge at that. But I think it's also really interesting to me that, the biggest players in terms of athletes had pretty much career-ending injuries. My dad being one of them, he tore his Achilles and can barely move his wrist down. Al Harrington tore his ACL and I believe his MCL as well. Mike Tyson, he's a boxer. He's probably got all kinds of, injuries. Calvin retired prematurely after, taking a bunch of beatings. So you look at, all these athletes who really had their bodies beat down at the prime of their career. It is fascinating how much longer their career probably could have gone had they had the knowledge and wisdom and, been legally able to do it, been promoted by the doctors and the medical staff and society, etc. How much longer they could have gone. I mean, you could have about 4 rings right now.
Oh, way more than that.
I say 5.
Way more than that.
No, I agree. I was actually watching an Al Harrington conversation where he stated like it's probably healthier for a ball player to, after a game, to take the edge off, maybe take an edible, than to drink, some type of hard alcohol. But they couldn't do that because the edible would have been illegal, right? So I concur 100% with that. And kind of moving into some recent news you guys had made about an investment in international cannabis, I would love for you guys to kind of go into what was your thinking around saying, hey, we're going to look outside of just the United States market for opportunities in cannabis.
Well, firm is named Isaiah International, and it's called International for a reason. Most of our business is outside of the U.S. borders, whether it be in Canada, whether it be in Europe, now Colombia. We do have businesses here in America, but we operate, internationally. And looking at the cannabis space again, the lessons learned in the champagne space. When we went into Champagne, we didn't realize that we were going into the agriculture and farming business. And as Joshua touched on, he talked about the indigenous growers and the farmers in Champagne. Once you develop the relationship with the growers and the farmers, and you start understanding the equatorial advantages that the land gives you, that the climate gives you, then you start understanding the crop that comes out of the soil and what makes it so unique, and the juices that you can extract from that crop that makes it so unique. So now you got a product that you can sell. Learning all that in the champagne space, when we looked at Colombia, and we talked about hemp and we talked about cannabis, well, the best hemp and cannabis is grown in Colombia. Why? Because of the equatorial advantages, because of the soil, because of the climate. You get 12 hours of natural sun. and the indigenous growers that we partnered with, very similar to what we did in the champagne space. So One World Farmer, when you look at the success that we're having in One World Farmer right now on the cannabis side, and also the success that we're having with Chelan Champagne in Europe and in France, they're very similar, just different crops, but really the same kind of business methodology that went into it. Fortunately enough for us in the Colombia space and in the hemp and cannabis space, we're able to extract multitudes of products out of one seed, as opposed to just a couple of things out of the grape. So it's a big opportunity. We see right now we're pioneering the space, just like we're pioneering the champagne space as the only owner importers of champagne. We're the largest owner importers of first press of the grape champagne in the world, and we're proud of that. And now in the cannabis space, operating in the Pan Americas, being able to supply not only the Americas, but also being able to reach across the water and enter into Europe and other different places where we see the plant having profound impact and impact in every industry, whether it be the auto industry, whether it be a medical industry, whether it be the food and beverage industry. This plant will play in every industry, and we want to be at One World Farmer, the leaders and the suppliers to those who are looking to impact those industries.
No, I love it. I'm rooting for you guys 100% because, figures like yourself, Al Harrington, just people that, our people respect and know are successful and have the intelligence you guys are in a lot of ways validating cannabis as a viable opportunity to the average person who's not following the industry. And I think that's important because we need more of us over here, right? We need more talented people. And and that kind of segues to my next point. It's been a trend that I've been seeing that I love, like you two being in business together, obviously. I just had a conversation with John Sally and his daughter they founded a cannabis company together. So we're seeing more like generational and family-based business from Black people in cannabis, which I hope to see continue to grow. Can you kind of speak on, Zeke, just being able to bring your family business into this in like such a cool and profitable way so early on in the industry?
Well, what I would say is the thing that we have to always remember as people of color, as Black culture, is that, most of our wealth, the only opportunity that we had to make wealth was through sports and entertainment. That was the only way out. There weren't that many people who got the opportunity to be doctors and lawyers. Now we're seeing those opportunities reflected, hopefully, in the country more and more. But being able to pass generational wealth, I'm proud to say, my dad was able to get into the NBA and then navigate himself through the business perspective, but get that basketball platform to be able to do so. Without many people of our type having those platforms, I'm not sure how much further we would be able to push this rock up the hill in terms of you calling us pioneers in the space. We definitely want to bring more like-minded people of color into the space, 100%. Want to pave the way for people to see this as, again, a medicine. It's exciting to be in a family business. Stressful sometimes because, your boss used to give you spankings, but at the same time, it's beautiful because you get to pick not only your dad's brain, your mom's brain, sister and cousins, but we all are in it together and really committed. And it's not just, everybody's got degrees, everybody's educated, everybody's has very beautiful resumes, but we've all come together and said, hey, let's move together as a family. And during this COVID time And during the civil rights uprising, nothing has been more important to me than family. So having the successes that we are having and will have will mean more to me than I think my father knows.
Oh man, that was smooth. I like that answer. Yeah, wrapping up, guys. I definitely don't want to hold you too long. I would love for you guys to talk about just what are your outlook on 2021, because cannabis and hemp did so well in 2020. What are some of the opportunities you guys are identifying and what you want to do moving forward?
I'll answer one and then I'll allow him to close out. Cannabis and hemp did very well in 2020, but also many small businesses closed and were impacted, and sales slowed down for many of those businesses. Yes, you're seeing billion-dollar valuations for some companies, which could be overvaluated, could be whatever. But as this space begins to, regulate or stabilize, you'll see, who really did the work to stay in the business, to have the forthright to go forward and not just look at it as selling weed. So I guess what I really want to communicate to anybody who's trying to get into this space is realize that you're getting into a space to A, help people, and B, to generate income. But you have to start with helping people first.
Agreed, 100%.
I would close out and just say that the opportunity that I see in this space is hemp is the natural carbon sink. And when we talk about hemp and its usefulness in the world at large, we're all dealing with climate change. We're all seeing the planet go through its temperature changes. And the way to control that and the natural way to reduce your carbon footprints is through the use of hemp. And I see this plant, again, being applied in every space, and not only being applied in every space, but reducing the carbon footprint across the world. So I think that's the biggest impact that the plant will have. While it will help us, our physical, I think what it will do for the environment and what it will do for climate change, we haven't even scratched the surface of how this plant is going to impact every single industry. So when you look at every piece of plastic in the world, and you look at every piece of plastic that's in your house, imagine that plastic being made of hemp now. That's how impactful this plant will be.
I agree 100%. And as Zeke alluded to earlier, a lot of us don't know the history of hemp and how many products and how many variety of things were made from hemp prior to it being outlawed. So I think the public will come around to it in due time. But thank you guys so much. It's an honor to have a conversation with you guys. I can't wait to send this to my uncle. I would love for you to leave us with where we maybe can follow the company on social media. And if anyone wants to reach out to you guys directly, maybe on like LinkedIn, if they have any questions.
The Isaiah International Twitter is
it's Isaiah International Twitter. It's Isaiah _international.com, and One World Pharma is OWP. But you can also go to our website, Isaiah International, and you can see all of the companies that we're involved in, and get some information. And I'm just Isaiah Thomas on Instagram, and
you can feel free to hit me at Zeke_Thomas. I'm more likely to respond to the DMs than him.
Of course.
Stay out of the DM. Don't DM me.
You're just talking to yourself in there.
Just, I read it and be like, hey.